The PlayStation Portal couldn't even play games natively, which left a lot of gamers disappointed and skipping it altogether. But now, reports and fresh leaks suggest Sony's planning a future handheld for the PS6 era. One that could rival the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck. That's why I've scoured the internet for days to pull everything together and answer the big question. Is a PlayStation 6 handheld really on the way? Let's break it all down. A lot of younger gamers might only know about the PlayStation Portal, but handheld gaming has actually been in Sony's DNA for a long time. First, we had the PlayStation Portable, aka the PSP. This thing was a monster. It sold over 80 million units worldwide and gave us legendary games like Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII, God of War, Chains of Olympus, and Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. For a lot of people, it was the first time you could really take proper console-style games on the go. Then came the PlayStation Vita in 2011. Now, the Vita is one of the most beloved devices in hindsight, but at launch it made some silly mistakes. The price was too high, and worst of all, you had to buy Sony's proprietary memory cards, which were ridiculously expensive. The original OLED model didn't include any storage at all, and even the slim model only gave you a tiny 1 gigabyte on board. Despite that, the Vita itself was way ahead of its time. It had a gorgeous OLED screen, touch controls on the front, on the screen and the back, dual analog sticks, motion sensors. It felt like a premium little PlayStation 4 in your hands. But Sony never really supported it properly as the PS4 came along and it was way more popular, and then they started focusing all their development time on that. And without the extra shoulder buttons to match the PlayStation 4 controller, ports were tricky. So when the Vita fizzled out, a lot of people thought that Sony was just done with handhelds until the PlayStation Portal came along. Now, the Portal got a ton of hate when it launched. A lot of YouTubers and gamers dismissed it because it could not play games natively. But interestingly enough, despite all of that negativity, the Portal actually sold really well. According to Circana analyst Matt Piscatella, by the end of 2024, more than 4% of PlayStation 5 owners in the US had picked one up. That's nearly 1 million Portals sold in the US alone. It's even finished 2024 as the #1 gaming accessory in dollar sales, beating out controllers, headsets, just everything. And that success might be one of the reasons Sony is suddenly taking handheld gaming more seriously again. After being dormant in this space for years, the Portal proved there's still strong demand for portable PlayStation experiences, which is why the idea of Sony now going one step further from a streaming device to a full, true native play handheld feels more likely than ever. And let's be real, the timing could not be better. The original Switch is now one of the best selling consoles of all time, closing in on the PlayStation 2's 160 million lifetime sales record. That's the most popular, best selling console of all time, and the Switch 2 is closing in on that. I think it's around 150 million it's at. And then recently we got the Switch 2, which is already breaking records with over 3.5 million units sold in just a few days. Meanwhile, the Steam Deck has sold several million units and carved out a passionate fan base, proving there's a market for powerful handheld PCs. Then you've got the Asus ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, and even Xbox is talking openly about making a handheld of their own. Clearly portable gaming is booming again, and Sony might not want to sit this one out. Some people say the console wars are over, especially with Xbox waving the white flag and putting all of its exclusives on every platform under the sun, but maybe the next big battle has simply shifted from the living room to the handheld market. What do you think? So what's actually been reported? Well, let's walk through the timeline. Back in late 2024, Bloomberg reported that Sony was in the early stages of developing a new handheld that could play PlayStation 5 games natively. This wasn't just speculation, it came from people familiar with the matter, and Bloomberg's track record here is pretty solid. Around that same time, Reuters reported that AMD had been chosen once again to provide the silicon for the PlayStation 6. That's important because it means Sony will continue to rely on AMD chips, which lines up with a lot of these handheld rumours. Then in August 2025, YouTuber Moore's Law is Dead dropped a brand new leak about Sony's next gen hardware. And this is where things get really interesting. According to him, the PlayStation 6 won't just be a single console, but will launch in multiple forms. There'll be the traditional home console, but also a dockable handheld version. Something that looks set to steal a few tricks from Nintendo's Switch 2. The documentation he says he has seen points to a late 2027 release and outlines some pretty powerful hardware. In plain English, without going into all the techno speak, I'll put some of the specs on screen for you if you're interested in that, but it is using a new AMD chip built for both efficiency and performance, and when you dock the handheld to your TV, it can boost its power even further. And here's the really exciting part. In that dock mode, this handheld could actually outperform a base PlayStation 5. That would make it the first time Sony has ever offered a portable that isn't a step down compared to its home console. But let's be honest, the PSP and the Vita were fantastic dedicated handhelds, but they were always less powerful than the PlayStation home console of their time. What is being reported here is different. Moore's Law is Dead believes that while the portable won't match the full PS6 console, we'll talk about that in a second, it'll basically run like a PlayStation 5 or even better when it's docked. A kind of supercharged PS5, I think it's safe to say. That would make it the most powerful gaming handheld ever made, even outperforming Microsoft's upcoming ROG Xbox Ally X. By the way, how crap are Xbox at naming their products? Which already costs around £800 in the UK and doesn't even play your Xbox console library, as it's basically just a Windows handheld with an Xbox badge slapped on the front. Now, I do want to stress, Moore's Law is Dead is just one source here, but he does have a strong track record. He nailed the PS5 Pro specs before Sony announced them, and those videos were taken down by Sony, so that only added fuel to the fire and to his credibility that he was spot on there, which he was. So while you should always take, leaks with a grain of salt, his history does give these reports some weight. But there are still big questions. The price for one. Reports suggest Sony could be targeting around $500 for this handheld. But let's be honest, that sounds super optimistic given the market these days where console prices that launched years ago are actually going up. The Switch 2 is already selling for near £400 in the UK, and the PS5 Pro goes for £700 without a disc drive. Building something with near PS5 performance or better in a portable form factor with a good battery life and heat management, and then selling it for under £500. That feels almost too good to be true. Still, the idea that Sony is working on a PS6 handheld that can dock like a Switch, run your PS4 and your PS5 library with some compromises, and then I guess your PS6 games, and then boost it when plugged into a TV dock, that could be a game changer for Sony. But that's not all. Some rumours suggest that Sony won't just release one PlayStation 6, but actually multiple versions. Supposedly there'll be the full fat PlayStation 6, the expensive all bells and whistles machine, which is a powerhouse, then a cheaper model, which I'm going to call the PS6S, similar idea to the Xbox Series S. That would basically be like a supercharged PlayStation 5, even though it's a PlayStation 6. And then, of course, the handheld version we've just been talking about. But here's where it gets a little bit murky, in my opinion. Are we actually talking about three separate systems? Or are some of these rumours describing the same device in different ways? Could the so-called PS6S, the supercharged PS5, actually be the handheld version, as their specs do sound kind of similar? It's not totally clear, and even if Sony does go down the route of multiple SKUs, what does that mean for their existing lineup? I mean, the PlayStation 5 Pro just launched, it feels like, and Sony is still supporting the base PS5, not to mention the PlayStation 4, which continues to get new releases. Do all of these models just disappear the moment the new PS6 hits the shelves? Or do we end up in a world where Sony has half a dozen different boxes on the market at once? This could get confusing fast. We already saw Microsoft run into problems with the Xbox Series X and the Series S. Even though the Series S sold really well, it created a headache for developers and left a lot of consumers scratching their heads. If Sony ends up with a full-fat PS6, a cheaper PS6S, and a handheld, on top of managing PlayStation 5 and PS4 support, it could be chaos. So is a PlayStation 6 handheld really on the way? With all the rumours and the noise in the industry right now, I definitely think Sony is planning something portable. Personally, I'd love to see a dockable PlayStation 6 handheld that plays my PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 6 libraries on the go. But whether it takes the form of a Switch-style hybrid or a more traditional handheld, that's still the big question. But what about you? Would you buy a PlayStation 6 handheld if it launches in 2027 or 2028? What's the deal breaker for you? Is it the price, the battery life, the power? Let me know in the comments, because I think this could be one of the biggest stories for the next generation of PlayStation. And with Xbox's new handheld basically being a gaming PC, it raises the question, could a PC replace your PlayStation? I put that to the test in this video on screen.